Number 10. The Rune. When Honda decided to flex its engineering muscles, they came out with the Rune, and calling it just a motorcycle doesn't quite do it justice. This wasn't just about making money. Honda lost nearly $90,000 on each one they sold. This was about showing the world what they could do when they weren't constrained by budgets or mass market appeal. Built off the Gold Wing platform, the Rune featured an 1832cc horizontally opposed six-cylinder engine with a 5-speed transmission. While it borrowed its heart from the Goldwing, nearly everything else was custom-made exclusively for this bike, from the brake reservoirs to the bodywork. It wasn't just a cruiser, it was an art piece. The Rune's size was something to behold. At 109 inches long, it was longer than most cruisers, even edging out the Victory Vision. The front suspension, a trailing bottom-length fork, was a rarity in production bikes and gave it a distinctive ride quality. It was built to be smooth, and in the world of heavy cruisers, few bikes rivaled its comfort. Despite its weight, 881 pounds wet, it had an aggressive power delivery. Making 80% of its torque at idle, it pulled like a freight train the moment you twisted the throttle. Honda only made around 1,200 of these, with 999 allocated to the US. It wasn't just rare, it was expensive. At $27,000, it cost more than the most expensive Honda Accord at the time, yet today, collectors recognize its true value. The Rune wasn't just a bike, it was Honda proving a point. Number 9. Honda CBR 1100XX Blackbird. This bike was Honda's answer to the need for speed. Built to take the title of the fastest production motorcycle in the world, and when it hit the scene in 1997, it did just that, beating out the Kawasaki ZX-11 for the top speed crown. It wasn't just about raw power. This thing was designed in a wind tunnel, giving it a sleek aerodynamic shape that helped it cut through air like a bullet. Under the hood, or rather under the fairings, Honda packed an 1137cc inline-4 engine with 16 valves and 11:1 compression ratio. This motor was all about smooth power delivery, helped by its dual counterbalancers that kept vibrations to a minimum. Early models ran on carburetors, but in 1999, Honda made the switch to fuel injection, adding 42mm throttle bodies for improved performance. In 2003, they refined the fuel mapping, giving the Blackbird even a smoother power delivery. It wasn't just about the engine, though. The 6-speed transmission was slick shifting, and Honda's linked braking system made sure stopping power matched the go-fast capabilities. Speaking of performance, this bike was no slouch. A 10.3-second quarter mile at 135 miles an hour? Yeah, that's fast. Top speeds ranged between 175 and 179 miles an hour depending on the conditions, making it one of the most dominant speed machines of its time. But then in 1999, Suzuki dropped the Hayabusa, and suddenly the Blackbird wasn't king anymore. The Busa set a new standard for speed, but that didn't make the Blackbird any less impressive. Now, if you've ever thrown a leg over one of these, you know it's a beast. The mid-range power is where it really shines, with a noticeable surge of around 5,000 RPMs that just keeps pulling. And let's not forget the handling. For a high-speed sport tour, it's got a balanced chassis, though some riders feel the handlebars are a bit too far forward for all-day comfort. A set of helibars could fix that if you were planning to rack up serious miles. Reliability, Honda nailed it. The Blackbird's engine is built tough. People have modified these things to double the stock horsepower without major internal changes. It's a favorite among engine builders and drag racers for a reason. Honda really put their best into this one, and it shows in the way these bikes hold up over time. So, is the CBR 1100XX Blackbird still a legend? Absolutely. It may have been dethroned by the Hayabusa, but it remains one of the best motorcycles to come out of the 2000s. Number 8. Honda Cub. If we're talking about the greatest Honda models ever made, it's impossible not to mention the Honda Cub series, the C50, C70, and C90. In the late 1950s, Honda wasn't the juggernaut we know now today. They needed something revolutionary, something that could get the average person who had never even thought about owning a motorcycle on two wheels. Enter the Honda Cub, a machine designed for real people, not just enthusiasts. It was small, lightweight, dead simple to ride, and built with legendary Honda reliability. What set the Cub apart? First, its 4-stroke engine. At the time, most small bikes were 2 strokes, loud, smoky, and temperamental. The Cub's 4-stroke was smooth, quiet, and could run on the worst fuel you could find. It was an engine that refused to die, capable of running on barely anything and still getting you where you needed to go. Then there was the semi-automatic transmission. No clutch lever, just click through the gears and go. This meant that just about anyone could hop on and ride, no learning curve required. That's exactly what Honda wanted, a motorcycle so intuitive that even a complete beginner could master it in minutes. These bikes were built to last. I've seen Cubs in parts of the world where roads barely exist, loaded with everything from livestock to entire families, still chugging along like it's nothing. They don't need meticulous care, expensive oil, or even good gas. They just run, and that's exactly why people keep buying them, decade after decade. But Honda didn't just build a brilliant bike. They also nailed the marketing. The "you meet the nicest people on a Honda" campaign wasn't just advertising, it was a game changer. It took motorcycles from the realm of outlaw bikers and speed junkies to something your neighbor, your teacher, or even your grandma could ride. This wasn't just a bike, it was a cultural shift. By the time the 1970s rolled around, Honda had sold millions of Cubs, and today that number is over 100 million. Number 7. The Honda Goldwing. When they drop a Goldwing, they don't just throw something together and hope for the best. They craft a machine that's built to eat miles and keep riders comfortable for decades. And this generation, it stuck around for 16 years. That's not an accident. Now, Honda didn't just leave it completely untouched. In 2012, they gave it a refresh, tweaked the design, improved some tech, and made the move from US production to Japan. But let's cut to the chase. Is this older Goldwing still relevant today? Absolutely. These bikes were built like tanks, and you still see them clocking over 150,000 miles without breaking a sweat. And the best part? They're more affordable than ever. If you're coming from a Harley or another cruiser, the Goldwing might feel different. Instead of that stretched out feet-forward stance, you're pulled in a little closer. Why? Better control, better weight distribution, and ultimately, better handling. The Goldwing isn't just a couch on wheels, it's got a real sport touring edge to it. And when you add in the tech, adjustable air suspension, cruise control, reverse gear, built-in communication system, even a key fob with remote locking, you start to see why this bike was ahead of its time. And then there's the engine, a beastly 1832cc flat six that runs smoother than just about anything else out there. Ever heard of the coin trick? Honda used to boast that you could balance a coin on the engine while it's running on idle. That's how smooth it is. Try doing that on the big V-twin. It's hooked up to a 5-speed gearbox with shaft drive, meaning less maintenance and more time on the road. And before anyone complains about it only having 5 gears, trust me, it doesn't need a 6th. 5th is an overdrive, and with the kind of torque this thing delivers, you'll never find yourself hunting for another gear. You don't just sit on a Goldwing, you sink into it. The wind protection is dialed in, the seat's all day comfortable, and when you twist the throttle, it pulls like a freight train. You can load it up with luggage, a passenger, and still cruise at highway speeds like it's nothing. And let's not forget one of the best parts, reliability. This bike just keeps going. Number 6. Honda CBR 600RR. Now, the 2013 model marked the start of the 3rd generation, and Honda made some real improvements. First off, the 12-spoke wheels, subtle change, but they added the stability. The upgraded ECU keeps the power delivery smooth, and that redesigned ram air system, it helps the bike breathe better, pulling more air straight through the frame into the airbox. This isn't just a minor tweak, it's a real performance boost. And the suspension, big piston forks up front, a tuned rear shock, this thing, it handles like a dream. That 599 inline 4 still punches out 119 horsepower. And if you're thinking that's not a lot by today's standards, you're missing the point. This bike isn't about sheer numbers, it's about the way it delivers power. It revs high, it builds speed predictably, and once you get past 9,000 RPMs, it really starts to sing. It's not the kind of power that rips your arms off, it's the kind that keeps you coming back for more. But let's talk about what Honda doesn't give you. There's no gear indicator, and if you're used to having one, you'll notice its absence real quick. You find yourself counting shifts or feeling around for another gear, and on a bike this well thought out, it's a surprising omission. Now, one of the most underrated aspects of the CBR 600RR, the handling. It's precise. Some bikes take a lot to get used to. This one just works. The way it responds to input, the way it leans into corners, the balance of the whole thing, it's what makes this bike so special. And then there's the HESD, or Honda's electronic steering damper. Unlike traditional dampers that are either on or off, this one adjusts dynamically. Low speed, it backs off and lets you maneuver freely. High speed, it tightens up and keeps things stable. It's a seamless system that just does its job. This thing looks good. The white base with red and blue accents, classic Honda racing colors, it's the kind of paint job that just won't age. Some bikes start to look dated after a few years. This one still turns heads. Number 5. Honda CBX. Honda's golden age of motorcycle engineering hit its peak with the CBX 1000, a six-cylinder marvel that still gets people talking decades later. If you ever heard one, you know exactly why. That high-pitched wail is straight out of a Formula One pit lane. But despite its jaw-dropping performance and futuristic design, the CBX didn't take off the way Honda had hoped. In just 4 years of production from 1979 to 1982, it sold a mere 25,000 units. For a company that prints money selling motorcycles, that was a problem. So what happened? Let's rewind. Honda built its reputation in the 60s and 70s by out-engineering the competition. The CB750, CB500, DOHC CB450, these bikes were light years ahead of anything else on the market, but by the late 70s, Honda had gotten comfortable. Meanwhile, Kawasaki was out there dropping missiles like the Z1, a machine built purely to go fast. Honda needed to make a statement. Enter the CBX. This wasn't just another inline-4 with a little extra sauce. It was a full-blown six-cylinder 24-valve beast, pushing past the 100 horsepower mark in stock trim. It was Honda flexing on the whole industry. The engine was tilted forward 33 degrees to make room for the rider, 6 carburetors sat in a V formation, and a jack shaft was added to keep the width reasonable. The result? A bike that looked like an engine with handlebars and sounded like a fighter jet tearing down the street. On paper, it should have been a home run. It was fast, it was smooth, and it handled better than people gave it credit for. Cycle World even noted that it had better lean clearance than any big bike they tested in years. And yet it never found its audience. Why? Because it was a lot. At 600 pounds, what with aggressive braking and a towering power band, it wasn't the everyman's bike. The CB750 had a universal motorcycle capable of anything, friendly to everyone. The CBX, not so much. It was intimidating, it was expensive, and let's be honest, it was excessive. Number 4. CBR 954RR. Released in 2002 as an evolution of the CBR 929RR, this bike brought a perfect balance of power, weight, and handling that still holds up today. The 954RR puts down 154 horsepower and 74 pound-feet of torque, with a dry weight of just 370 pounds. That translated to a 0 to 60 time of 2.8 seconds, a quarter mile in 10.3 seconds, and a top speed of 178 miles an hour. Even by today's standards, that's an impressive power-to-weight ratio, rivaling modern leader bikes. But the magic of the 954 wasn't just about raw numbers, it was how it felt on the road. Unlike many leader bikes, which can feel like a handful, the 954RR handled more like a 600. It was nimble, lightweight, and flickable, giving riders the best of both worlds. The ease of a middleweight with the power of a full-throttle superbike. Honda achieved this by expertly distributing weight and keeping the ergonomics rider-friendly. With a 32.1-inch seat height and an actual usable trunk space rare for sport bikes, this was a machine built not just for track days, but for real-world riding. Beyond its performance, the 954RR proved to be exceptionally durable. Many owners report running these bikes well past their expected service intervals without major issues. The full titanium exhaust system was another standout feature, something rarely seen even on high-end bikes today. While Honda recommended valve adjustments every 16,000 miles, plenty of owners stretched that to 32,000 without any issues. Proof of how over-engineered the bike was. Another major advantage, fuel efficiency. When ridden conservatively, the 954 could hit up to 42 miles a gallon, giving it a nearly 200-mile range. That kind of practicality in a superbike is almost unheard of, making it an excellent choice for anyone looking for a balance between performance and everyday usability. The 954RR wasn't just about going fast in a straight line. It had the stopping power to match, with a front brake system that delivered immediate and confident feedback. Whether carving through canyons or navigating city streets, the bike responded with pinpoint precision, making every ride feel intuitive and natural. If there's one downside, it's that the 954 lacked a fuel gauge and that the engine could be a bit noisy. But these were minor trade-offs for a machine that excelled in nearly every other category. Honda nailed the formula with the 954, making it one of the most beloved Fireblades of all time. In today's market, with new sports bikes pushing well over 200 horsepower and packing in rider aids to help manage their aggressive power delivery, the 954RR feels refreshingly pure. Number 3. RC166. Back in the 1950s, Honda had a problem. Japanese motorcycles weren't respected on the world stage. European manufacturers like MV Agusta and Norton dominated the sport, and Honda was seen as a company making simple commuter bikes. But Soichiro Honda had a vision. Racing wasn't just about trophies. It was about proving to the world that Honda could build the best motorcycles. And to do that, they had to take on the toughest race of them all, the Isle of Man TT. The first attempt in 1959 with the RC142 was ambitious, but let's be real, it wasn't winning anything. It was reliable, sure, but just not fast enough. That didn't stop Honda, though. They kept refining, kept pushing the limits of what was possible, and by the mid-60s, they had something truly special, the RC166. This was no ordinary race bike. It was a 250cc six-cylinder screamer that revved to an absolutely absurd 20,000 RPMs. That's right, 20,000. 6 tiny cylinders, 4 overhead cams, 24 valves, and an exhaust note that sounded like an angry swarm of bees. When Honda rolled the RC166 onto the grid, the competition didn't stand a chance. In 1966, Mike Halewood threw a leg over it and proceeded to wipe the floor with everyone, winning 10 out of 11 races that season. Honda wasn't just winning, they were making a statement. They took every manufacturer title that year, from 50cc to 500cc, proving that their engineering was second to none. But here's where it gets interesting. Just as Honda cemented itself as the king of Grand Prix racing, they walked away. By 1967, two-strokes were riding fast, and Honda, seeing the shift, decided to refocus their efforts elsewhere. Still, the RC166 left a legacy that echoes through every high-revving Honda sports bike today. Whether it's the screaming inline fours of the CBR lineup or the meticulous engineering of their MotoGP machines, it all traces back to that little six-cylinder beast from the 60s. Number 2. 5th Gen versus 6th Gen Honda VFR 800. If you've been around the VFR scene, you've probably heard the arguments. Some swear by the 5th Gen, calling it the pinnacle of the platform, while others say the 6th Gen refined everything and left the older model in the dust. Well, I finally got my hands on both, and we're putting them head-to-head to find out which one truly deserves the crown. First, let's talk about what we're dealing with. The 5th Gen VFR 800 ran from 98 to 2001, bringing the now legendary RC46 engine, complete with gear-driven cams. In year 2000, it got closed-loop fuel injection, pretty cutting edge for the time. The 6th Gen picked up where it left off in 2002 and ran until 2009, swapping out the gear-driven cams for cam chain and introducing VTEC. Some people love it, others think it was Honda trying to reinvent a bike that did need fixing. I picked up a 2000 5th Gen that had seen better days. Bad paint, neglected maintenance, it needed some love. So before throwing it into the ring with my well-kept 2004 6th Gen, I made sure it got the works. Fresh fluids, new tires, upgraded clutch, and a can and an air filter to even the playing field. Now, onto the ride. The 5th Gen surprised me. It's smooth, composed, and flickable. At low speeds, it even felt a little more manageable than the 6th Gen. The ergonomics are nearly identical, but the slimmer tank on the 5th Gen makes it feel smaller, even though the difference is minor. When it comes to handling, it's a dead heat. You could jump in between the two bikes and feel right at home on either. But styling, that's where the 6th Gen pulls ahead. The 5th Gen was clearly inspired by 90s MotoGP bikes, but by 2002, Honda was moving forward with sharper lines and a sleeker look, borrowing from the RC211V race bike. The underseat exhaust, angular fairings, digital speedo, it still looks like a modern sport tourer despite being almost 20 years old. The 5th Gen, on the other hand, shows its age. It's not bad, but it just doesn't have that same aggressive stance. The 5th Gen has that gear-driven cam line, music to the ears of VFR purists, but it also has more rotating mass, which means it takes a little more effort to get moving. The 6th Gen's cam chain designs and VTEC give it a more refined power delivery, and when that second set of intake valves opens up at 6,800 RPM, you feel it. Off the line, the 6th Gen is snappier and easier to launch, but at high revs, the 5th Gen claws back some of the advantage. In real-world riding, though, the 6th Gen takes it. Reliability is where things get interesting. Honda built the 5th Gen like a tank, but let's not pretend it's maintenance-free. Valve adjustments still need to be done, and while it doesn't have the cam chain tensioners to worry about, parts for these older bikes are getting scarce. The 6th gen's biggest flaw? Those tensioners. Almost every long-term owner had to replace them. The aftermarket helps, but it's still a weak spot. That said, more of these bikes are sold, meaning parts are easier to find. If we're talking reliability, the 5th gen edges out in a win, but when it comes to ease of ownership, the 6th gen fights back with availability. Affordability is another factor. The 5th gen is still highly sought after, and clean ones hold their value. The limited production run means prices stay high, but they might even appreciate over time. The 6th gen, meanwhile, is more common and generally cheaper to buy. If you're looking for a bargain, the 6th gen is the way to go. So tallying it up, the 6th gen takes styling, acceleration, and cost of ownership. The 5th gen wins reliability. Handling, it's a tie. If I had to pick one, I'm sticking with the 6th gen. It's more modern, more refined, and still one of the best looking bikes Honda ever made. But that's just my take. What about you? Is the 5th gen still king, or did I get it right? Let me know in the comments. Number 1. Honda CBR 1000 RRR Fireblade. It's not just a mouthful of a name, it's a statement of Honda's engineering prowess. Born from Honda's MotoGP experience, this machine is built for speed, precision, and performance. Under the fairings, you get a 999cc inline-4 engine producing a staggering 214 horsepower. This isn't just a fast bike, it's a technological marvel. The electronic suite is packed with ride-by-wire throttle, selectable power modes, quartering ABS, and a 6-axis IMU that keeps everything in check. Honda left no stone unturned in pursuit of the perfect ride. But here's the thing, this bike isn't just about raw numbers, it's about control. The aerodynamics package is straight out of MotoGP, with winglets designed to keep you planted at high speeds. The aluminum twin spar frame ensures razor-sharp handling, and the Showa suspension offers top-tier performance whether you're carving through canyons or setting lap times at the track. The Fireblade isn't a bike you buy for comfort. It's stiff, aggressive, and demands respect. It's built for riders who want to push their limits. Against rivals like the Yamaha R1M, Kawasaki ZX-10R, and Ducati Panigale V4, the Fireblade holds its own with a unique blend of precision and reliability. So, do you think we left anything out? I know, this list can't please everybody, but if you feel like we missed something, let us know. If there's anything here you think doesn't deserve a spot, speak up. We want to hear from you in the comments section down below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoyed the video so far.